My mom called me a freeloader in front of 50 guests, and my stepdad told me to take my cheap gift and get out. I smiled, opened the box, and watched their faces change. Since then, my phone won't stop ringing. But the real reason they're calling? You won't guess. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments. And I will give you a heart. I'm Thea Myers, I'm 28, and I'm standing in the middle of the Cedar Grove Country Club ballroom in New Jersey with a navy blue gift box pressed against my ribs like a shield, while my mother's smile is stretched so tight it looks painful, and my stepfather is enjoying himself way too much, the way a man enjoys a public execution when he thinks he's holding the rope. And I can feel 50 pairs of eyes doing that quiet rich people scan where they pretend they're being polite, but they're really deciding what category you belong in, and my mother has already decided for them because she's been doing it for years. She clears her throat, tips her head, and says loud enough for the women in pearls and the men in golf sweaters to hear. "This is my daughter, Thea. She's well. She's always had trouble standing on her own." And everyone makes that sympathetic sound that isn't sympathy at all. It's permission. It's the kind of sound people make when they're relieved the mess isn't theirs, and I'm not new to that sound. I grew up on it. I grew up on the constant tiny reminders that love in my house had rules, and the rules changed depending on whether you were useful. And tonight I'm watching the same game play out again. Only this time I'm not 16 and trapped in a closet-sized bedroom hoping to be picked. I'm 28 and I came here on purpose, which is the part they still don't understand. My mother, Linda Thornton, doesn't do messy emotions. She does optics. She does narrative. She does how does this look from the outside. And when my father died, she didn't just grieve. She pivoted, like grief was a bad outfit she could return for store credit. But I'm getting ahead of myself because to understand why I'm holding this box like it's heavier than it should be, you need to understand what my mother did the moment she realized my father wouldn't be coming back through the door. My father, David Myers, was a construction engineer, not the kind who wore suits. The kind who came home smelling like dust and metal and sunscreen because he'd been out on site all day. The kind who clapped too loud at school plays and embarrassed you on purpose because he thought your smile was worth any amount of secondhand embarrassment. And the last morning I saw him alive, he kissed my forehead and told me to start thinking about my future, said we'd visit that college campus I'd been obsessing over when he got back. And the way he said it made me believe him because my father didn't say things just to sound good. He said things because he meant them. Then a truck driver fell asleep at the wheel upstate, and I learned a new kind of silence, the kind that happens when adults stop being adults and start being frightened animals. At the funeral, my mother stood there accepting condolences with this practiced grace like she was auditioning for the role of widow, and I remember thinking, okay, we're going to survive this because she's holding it together, and I was wrong in a way that still makes my skin go cold when I think about it, because 2 weeks later, she was packing my father's life into cardboard boxes like she was clearing out a storage unit, his books, his tools, the watch his father gave him, the stupid coffee mug that said world's okayest dad that I gave him when I was 9, and she didn't ask me if I wanted anything, not one single thing, which felt less like grief and more like erasure, and I didn't understand why until I overheard her on the phone one night, her voice low and excited, not sad, not cracked, excited, saying, "The insurance money came through. I can finally start over." And the word "start over" landed in my chest like a brick, because what do you mean start over? I was 16, I was right there. Was I part of the before she was trying to wipe away? Or was I just luggage she hadn't figured out how to lose yet? And that was the first time I felt it, that sharp, humiliating truth that some parents don't see. Their kids as people, they see them as extensions, as props, as reflections. And if the reflection doesn't flatter them, they try to change the mirror. I didn't know then that my mother had already met Richard Thornton. I didn't know there had been dinners and phone calls and just friends texts while my father was still alive. I didn't know the overlap. I only knew that my mother's grief looked suspiciously like relief. And when you're 16, you don't have the language for betrayal. You just have that sick feeling in your throat when something is wrong, but nobody will admit it. 18 months later, my mother married Richard in a courthouse ceremony I wasn't invited to, and she told me afterward like she was telling me she'd switched cell phone plans. It was just a formality, nothing worth making a fuss over, which was her favorite phrase whenever she wanted to do something cruel without consequences. And we moved into Richard's 4-bedroom colonial in suburban New Jersey. with the manicured lawn and the two-car garage and the framed family photos that all somehow looked like Richard and his son Derek were the main characters, and my mother was the upgraded accessory. And me, I was the leftover from a life my mother was trying to delete. Derek was 20 and already had that smug, coasting confidence of someone who'd never had to earn basic kindness. He got the master guest room with the ensuite. He drove a new BMW because Richard believed a young man needs the right impression. And I got the smallest room, not even a room, a converted storage closet with a tiny window that faced a fence. And the first night I stood in that closet looking at the single shelf and the cheap lamp they'd thrown in there like charity, and I realized I'd been demoted, not just in the house and the family, because families are supposed to be safety nets, but mine was turning into a trapdoor. And every time I tried to talk about school or friends or grief, my mother acted like I was bringing up an embarrassing old story at the wrong dinner party. When college applications came around and I got into a decent school with a partial scholarship, I worked up the courage to ask her about the gap. $8,000 a year, not nothing, but not impossible if you actually cared. And she didn't even let me finish. She said, "The insurance money is for rebuilding this family. Derek needs support for his studies. Besides, you're nearly 18. You should be learning independence." And Richard looked up from his newspaper with that thin smile and said, "This house doesn't support freeloaders. Want a degree, earn a scholarship. That's how the real world works." And my mother nodded along like he'd said something noble instead of evil. And that was when it clicked. Love had become a contract in that house. And I didn't meet the terms. The crazy part is they said real world. Like I hadn't been living in it already. Like I hadn't been watching my mother spend my father's absence like money, like I hadn't been learning the hardest lesson early, which is that the people who talk the most about loyalty are usually the ones who weaponize it, because loyalty is a leash when it's only expected from one side. That night before my high school graduation, I lay in my little closet room staring at the water-stained ceiling doing math like my life depended on it, because it did. No savings, no help, a scholarship that wasn't enough, and a stepfather who'd made it clear I was expected to be out the day I turned 18. And I remember thinking, if I fail, they'll use it as proof that they were right about me. They'll tell everyone I was ungrateful, lazy, difficult, that I couldn't make it, and they'll enjoy the story because it makes them the heroes, and I hated them for that. Hated the way they could hurt me and still paint themselves as generous. And then my phone buzzed with an unknown Boston number. I almost ignored it, but something in me answered, and a woman's voice said, "Thea, this is Patricia, your Aunt Patty, David's sister." And my heart stopped because I hadn't heard that side of my family since the funeral. My mother cut them off like you cut off a bad influence. And Aunt Patricia told me there was something my father left for me. Something he made her promise to keep safe until I truly needed it. And I lied to my mother about a study weekend, took a 6-hour bus to Boston, and when Aunt Patricia hugged me, I smelled my father on her somehow. The same laundry soap, the same warmth, and I almost broke right there. But she sat me at her kitchen table and brought out a small wooden box with brass hinges. And inside was a savings passbook in my name, Thea Marie Myers, and I opened it and saw the last entry, and my brain couldn't process it. $47,000. My father had been putting away money since I was 3. $20 here, $50 there, more when he got overtime, and he never told my mother because he didn't trust her with it. And when I tell you that truth hit me like oxygen, like grief and love at the same time, I mean, I couldn't breathe because he knew what she was capable of. He knew I might need protection from the person who was supposed to protect me. And under the passbook was an envelope with his handwriting, and the letter started, "My darling Thea, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to protect you. And by the time I got to, it was never your fault. I was crying so hard I couldn't see the words, and Aunt Patricia just sat there, not rushing me, just letting me finally have what my mother had denied me, a safe place to fall apart. I came back to New Jersey with a secret burning in my chest, and the first thing my mother did was interrogate me, because she didn't care where I was emotionally. She cared whether I'd obeyed. She said she called a classmate's mom and caught me in the lie, and when I told her I went to see Aunt Patricia, her face did this thing I'll never forget, a flicker of fear, then anger, then control, and she said, "We don't speak to that side anymore." Like I was a child who'd tried smoking. And Richard stepped in and said, "Your father's dead, you live under my roof, you follow my rules." And my mother stood there and let him say, "Your father's dead," to my face like it was a useful tool. And that was the moment I stopped begging, because something in you dies when you realize your parent will sacrifice you for comfort. I lasted 3 more weeks, graduated with an empty seat where my family should have been, packed my life into 2 suitcases, left a note on the counter that said, "Thank you for teaching me exactly who I can depend on." And I left, and I didn't call, not because I was petty, but because I was building. And when you're building from nothing, you don't have extra energy to keep touching the thing that burned you. I moved to New York, worked ridiculous hours, waitressed, interned, freelanced, ate day-old pastries, and drank black coffee like fuel, learned how to turn small spaces into homes for people who actually wanted to live inside their lives. And while I was doing all that, my mother was telling everyone her version, that I was ungrateful, that I ran off, that I was unstable, that I couldn't survive without her. She used my absence like proof of my defect, not proof of her cruelty. 10 years went by. 10 years of my mother never calling once. Not on birthdays, not on holidays, not even out of guilt. And then an invitation showed up like a trap wrapped in expensive paper. A 15th anniversary party for Linda and Richard Thornton at the country club. And the second I saw it, I knew she wanted something, because my mother doesn't reach out unless there's a reason, and Aunt Patricia confirmed it. She'd heard whispers that Richard's business was shaky, that their lifestyle was wobbling, that the membership fees and charity appearances weren't as easy to maintain, and I thought, okay, that's why I'm suddenly useful again. And I still decided to go, not because I missed her, but because I wanted to close the chapter while I was strong enough to not get pulled back in, and yes, I know how. That sounds walking back into the lion's mouth to prove you're not afraid of teeth. But there's a certain kind of power in showing up to the place you were once humiliated and realizing you're not the same person anymore. And that's what brought me to this ballroom in Cedar Grove, New Jersey, under crystal chandeliers and soft music and fake laughter. Holding a box, I wrapped myself, because even after everything, I wanted to test a question that had haunted me for years. Not, will she love me? But is she capable of it? And before I go further, I want to ask you something right now, and I mean it because I know I'm not the only one who's lived through this kind of family math where love equals what you provide. Where are you watching from today? What city and what time is it where you are? Because I swear these stories happen in every zip code, every income bracket, every family that looks perfect in pictures but rots in private. So drop it in the comments, tell me your city and the time, and while you're there, tell me this too. Do you think a parent can cross a line so far that, but their family stops meaning anything? Because I'm about to show you exactly where my mother drew the line, and exactly where I decided I was done stepping over it. The room tonight is full of people who think they know me. They think I'm the cautionary tale. And my mother is feeding them little bites of that story, like she's hosting a tasting menu. She tells one woman I couldn't handle college. She tells a man by the bar I fell in with bad influences. She laughs about my phase like my life was a tantrum. And the worst part is she's so comfortable lying because she's done it for so long that the lies feel like facts in her mouth. Derek sidles up to me with champagne in hand, older now but still the same empty confidence. And he does that fake friendly thing. Well, look who decided to resurface. And I can smell his cologne and entitlement from a foot away. He looks at the box and smirks. What is that, a candle? And I keep my face calm because I learned a long time ago that reacting is how you hand them power. I say, I was invited. And he laughs like that's the funniest thing he's heard all week. Yeah, sure, Mom felt sorry for you. And it hits me that even now they can't imagine me being here as an equal. It has to be pity, charity, desperation. Because if I'm not beneath them, their whole story collapses. And then my stepfather Richard spots me, and I watch him lean into my mother, whisper something, and she turns and gives me that small nod, the nod you give a delivery driver, and I feel that old familiar sting, not sadness, not even anger, just the cold clarity of nothing changed. And I walk over anyway, because I didn't come for comfort, I came for truth. I place the box on the table in front of them and I say, Happy anniversary, Mom. And she doesn't touch it. She looks at it like it's suspicious. Like generosity from me must have strings attached because that's how she operates. And she starts performing, louder now so the tables nearby can hear. Oh, that's sweet. Thea brought something. She's always been creative. And a couple of women laugh politely because my mother is cueing them and Richard snorts and says, We don't need your cheap gift. And he says it like he's repeating an old line he enjoyed the first time, and my mother adds, "You're a freeloader, Thea. You always have been." And there it is, the public execution, the rope, and 50 witnesses, and I can feel the room holding its breath, waiting for the meltdown they've been promised, waiting for the embarrassing daughter to prove her mother right. And I don't give them that. I don't cry. I don't yell. I don't defend myself like a kid on trial. I just smile, because in that moment, I finally understand something clean and brutal. They need me to be small to make their lives feel big, and I'm done participating. I lift the box back into my hands, and I tell my mother, softly but clearly, "You're going to want to see what you just refused." And Richard barks, "Get out." And I nod like he just gave me directions, and I start to loosen the ribbon anyway, slow, deliberate, the kind of slow that makes people lean in because humans can't resist a reveal. And my mother's face shifts, curiosity fighting pride, because she wants to know, she always wants to know what she might be missing, and I can feel the room tilt toward me, phones half lifted, eyes sharpened, and I think about 16-year-old me doing math on a stained ceiling, and I think about my father's letter, and I think about how some parents treat love like a rigged game where the rules only benefit one child, one spouse, one image, and I take a breath, and I lift the lid just enough for the navy velvet inside to catch the light, and the room goes so quiet you can hear the ice clink in someone's glass, and my mother leans forward without meaning to, and Richard's sneer hesitates for half a second, and Derek takes a step closer, and I look up at all of them and I say, "Since we're doing this in public, let's do it properly." And I open the box the rest of the way, but I don't show them everything yet, not all at once, because part of taking your power back is controlling the timing, controlling the narrative, controlling the moment they've tried to steal from you your whole life. And as I angle the box toward the table lights, I see my mother's eyes widen just a fraction, not enough for anyone to call it shock, but enough for me to know I hit something real. And right then, before a single word lands, before they can spin it, before they can interrupt, I decide I'm going to say the one thing they've never been able to handle from me. The truth, said calmly, in front of witnesses, and the second I open my mouth, I watch my mother's face start to change. Like she suddenly realizes the story she's been telling for 10 years is about to meet the version of me she can't control anymore. The room doesn't erupt right away because people like this need a second for their brains to catch up when the script changes, and I can see it happening in real time. The way my mother's eyes flick from the box to my face to the guests, like she's recalculating odds, like she's trying to decide whether to double down or retreat. And Richard's mouth opens as if he's about to bark another order, but nothing comes out because for the first time since I walked in, he doesn't know which role he's playing, bully or host. And Derek is hovering now, curiosity pulling him closer even though pride tells him to stay back. And I feel that old familiar heat in my chest, the one that used to mean panic. But now it means clarity, because when you've survived the worst version of someone, the public version doesn't scare you anymore. I rest the open box on the table, not pushing it toward them yet, just letting the navy velvet glow under the lights like a promise, and I say calmly, "You called me a freeloader." And my mother scoffs reflexively, because denial is her favorite language, but I keep going before she can interrupt. "You told everyone here I couldn't survive on my own," and I gesture around the room, not accusing, just stating, because there's a power in neutrality that people like her can't stand. They need drama to drown out facts, and Richard finally finds his voice and says, "This is not the place." And I look at him and think about how many times he told me his house wasn't the place for freeloaders, how many times he enjoyed saying it, and I say, "You're right, this isn't the place for lies," and there's a ripple through the guests because now they're invested. Now they're not just watching a family argument, they're watching a story break, and stories are currency in rooms like this. My mother's lips thin and she says, "Thea, don't do this." And I almost laugh because she means don't expose me, not don't hurt yourself. And I answer her honestly, I didn't come here to do anything, I came here to give something. And I lift the key just enough that the light hits it, and I hear an actual gasp, not from my mother, from one of the women at the table, because money has a sound, and people who live around it recognize it instinctively, and my mother's head snaps toward the key, and then back to me, and her voice drops, sharp now, controlled. "Where did you get that? Not are you okay? Not how did you do it, but where did you get it?" Because in her mind things aren't earned, they're acquired, taken, leveraged, and I say, "I worked," and she laughs, a short, ugly sound. "Don't be ridiculous." And that's when something in the room shifts, because a few people frown, because working isn't ridiculous to them, because some of them actually did, once. And I can see Eleanor Brooks standing near the edge of the group, my father's old friend, watching everything with that quiet stillness of someone who's already putting pieces together. And I keep my eyes on my mother and say, I worked when I was waitressing 30 hours a week and taking a full course load. I worked when I interned for free and learned how to turn nothing into something. I worked when I slept 5 hours a night because failure wasn't an option. And Richard scoffs and says, spare us the sob story. And that word, sob, lands wrong because there are no tears in my voice, there's no pleading, and the guests can feel the mismatch. The way his cruelty doesn't fit the tone. And I add, I worked while you were telling people I couldn't hold a job, and now the murmurs are louder because the contradiction is obvious, and I finally slide the documents out from under the key and lay them flat, not pushing them, not shoving them, just placing them there like evidence, and I say, that key belongs to a 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan, and someone actually laughs in disbelief, and my mother says, too quickly, she's lying, and Eleanor steps forward, calm as a blade, and says, then let her finish. And my mother shoots her a look that could curdle milk, because Eleanor has always been immune to her, and I continue. Upper West Side. Doorman building, fully paid, no mortgage. And now there's no pretending. Now the room is alive. People are whispering. Phones are coming out. Someone says, what did she say her last name was? And Derek blurts, that's impossible. Because he needs it to be impossible. His entire sense of self depends on it. And I meet his eyes and say, Google me. And I watch him actually do it, his thumb jerky on the screen, his face draining as the search results load. And my mother is staring now, not at the box, not at the guests, at me. Like she's seeing a stranger. And that's exactly right. Because the version of me she knew only existed under her control, and control is gone. She opens her mouth and closes it, opens it again and says, you expect us to believe you bought an apartment? And I answer, no, I expect you to believe your story about me was wrong. And that's when Eleanor speaks again, her voice clear, carrying, Linda, you told me your daughter dropped out of college and was living hand to mouth. And my mother turns on her. I never said that. And Eleanor doesn't blink. You said she was unstable, that she refused your help, that she couldn't manage adult responsibilities. And a few heads turn sharply now, because nobody likes being lied to retroactively, and I add, quietly, you told them what made you look good. And Richard slams his hand on the table. The glassware rattles, and he says, enough. But it's too late for enough, because the truth has momentum. And I reach into my clutch and pull out the folded letter, and I don't even need to say what it is, because Eleanor inhales sharply and says, David's handwriting. And my mother goes white, not pale, white, and she whispers, you don't have that. And I say, he gave it to me. And the room holds its breath again, because dead fathers have authority that living mothers can't override. And I unfold the letter slowly, deliberately, and I read just enough, not the whole thing. Not yet. I know. Your mother has her flaws. I know she doesn't always put you first. That's not your fault. And someone near the back says, oh my God, under their breath, and my mother says, stop. And I don't, because she didn't stop when she packed his life into boxes. She didn't stop when she told me to be independent at 18 with nothing. She didn't stop when she told people I was a failure, and I finished the line. I've set aside money in your name, separate from anything your mother can access. And now the murmurs aren't polite. They're sharp, they're judgmental, and Eleanor says, very softly, Linda, is that true? And my mother looks around the room like she's looking for an exit that doesn't exist, and she says, David was paranoid. And I snap the letter closed, not angry, just done, and I say, he was prepared. And that lands harder than any insult, because preparedness implies foresight, implies intention, implies he saw this coming, and the idea that my father didn't trust her cuts deeper than anything I could say, and Richard grabs my mother's arm, whispering urgently, trying to contain the damage. But the damage is already loose, because the guests are recalibrating, because nobody likes realizing they've been complicit in a lie, and someone near the bar says she has a website, and someone else says her work was an Architectural Digest. And my mother's world is cracking, not because she lost money, but because she lost narrative control, and she does what she always does when cornered. She pivots to emotion, tears springing up like a switch flipped, voice trembling just right. "Thea, sweetheart, I didn't know. I was doing my best." And there it is, the rewrite, the attempt to turn herself into the wounded party. And 10 years ago, that might have worked on me. I might have rushed to comfort her, might have apologized for making her feel bad about hurting me. But not tonight. Because tonight, I see it clearly, and I say, "Your best involved telling people I was worthless." And the room goes quiet again, because that word hangs, worthless, and my mother says, "I never said that." And Eleanor cuts in, "You implied it." And my mother turns on her. "This is family business." And Eleanor answers, "You made it public." And there's something almost funny about the way my mother's face twists, because she's realizing the rules she said don't apply anymore. And I close the box gently, deliberately, like I'm sealing a decision, and I say, "I brought this gift because I wanted to know if there was any part of you that could see me as more than a liability." And my mother reaches for it, her hand shaking, and says, "Give it to me, we can talk later." And I pull it back, not dramatically, just firmly, and I say, "No." And that one word is louder than everything else, and she hisses, "You're humiliating me." And I look at her and think about all the nights I cried in that closet, all the times she let Richard call me a freeloader, all the lies she told, and I say, "You humiliated yourself." And Richard steps forward again, switching tactics, voice smooth now. "Let's not ruin a beautiful evening." And I meet his eyes and say, "You already did, you just didn't think anyone would notice." And Derek mutters, "This is insane." And I look at him and say, "So is giving you everything while telling me to be independent." And the guests are watching like they're at a trial where the verdict is already in, and my mother's tears dry instantly. Fury flashing, and she spits, "You ungrateful little." And I cut her off, "I'm grateful to my father." And that lands like a slap, because gratitude is a mirror, and she doesn't like what it shows her, and I turn slightly, addressing the room now, not them. I was told for years that I couldn't survive on my own, that I was a burden, and I gesture to the box. I built this life anyway, and I don't need to brag. The facts are doing the work, and Eleanor nods, once, approving, and I feel something loosen in my chest, because for the first time, witnesses matter. Not because I need validation, but because lies die faster in daylight. And I pick up the box, tuck it under my arm, and I say to my mother, "This gift was for a mother who wanted a daughter, not a prop." And she lunges, actually lunges, grabbing my wrist, nails digging in, and hisses, "You can't do this to me." And I gently remove her hand, not roughly, not cruelly, just decisively, and I say, "I already did." And I turn toward the door, and the room parts without anyone consciously moving, because people recognize finality when they see it. And as I walk away, I hear my mother say my name, once, not commanding, not performing, just scared. And for a split second I consider turning back, because that's the muscle memory, that's the training. But then I remember the 16-year-old girl doing math on a stained ceiling, and I keep walking, because this isn't about punishment, it's about consequence. And as the doors swing open and cool night air hits my face, I realize something that surprises me. I'm not shaking, I'm not empty, I'm not even angry, I'm steady, and behind me, inside that glittering room, a story that lived for 10 years just died, and in front of me is the quiet, terrifying freedom of knowing exactly who I am without their permission. And as I step into the night, phone already buzzing in my pocket, I know the real reckoning hasn't even started yet, because when people like my mother lose control, they don't go quietly, and the fallout from this moment is about to spread far beyond that ballroom. I barely make it to the curb before my phone starts vibrating like it's possessed. Not one polite ring either. It's that frantic rapid-fire buzz that screams somebody's panicking on the other end. And I already know who it is without looking, because there are only 3 types of people who call you that hard. Someone who loves you, someone who needs you, or someone who just lost control of you. And my mother is not calling out of love. She's calling because her audience just watched her mask slip off, and now she's trying to stitch it back on with my skin. I slide into the rideshare Marcus ordered for me earlier, because he knows me too well. He knew I'd need an exit, and the second the door shuts, I finally exhale, like my lungs have been holding their breath since I walked into that country club. The driver asks, "Rough night?" And I give him the most neutral answer on earth. Long story. Because explaining parental betrayal to a stranger is like trying to summarize a decade of rot in one sentence, and besides, I can feel the adrenaline still pumping, that strange clean buzz you get after you do something terrifying and survive it. I look at my phone, 47 missed calls, and I don't even feel guilty. I feel relieved because the guilt used to be my mother's leash. She trained me to feel wrong for protecting myself. And tonight, I finally cut that leash in front of witnesses. Marcus texts, "Where are you?" And I text back, "On my way," and then I do something I've never done in my life. I block my mother's number. Not forever maybe, but for tonight, because not every call deserves access to me. And I'm not handing her the microphone while she's still mid-meltdown. I lean my head against the window and watch the lights blur by, and all I can think is, it's done, it finally happened, the truth is out loud. And then the first unexpected thing hits. Not sadness, not triumph, but this weird little laugh that escapes me because the irony is almost comedy. My mother spent 10 years telling people I couldn't survive, and the moment she said it out loud in front of 50 people, she basically handed me the stage to prove her wrong with one box. And now she's going to spend the next few weeks doing what she always does when she's exposed. She's going to rewrite the story. She's going to recruit allies. She's going to throw the word family around like it's a court order. And she's going to try to make me look cruel, because when narcissistic people get caught, they don't apologize, they litigate. My phone keeps buzzing anyway from unknown numbers, and that's when I realize the guests are already doing what people do after a public rupture. They're picking sides, they're gossiping, they're forwarding screenshots, and they're searching my name like it's a stock ticker. One voicemail comes through from a blocked number, because apparently my mother found a workaround already, and it's her voice, breathy, trembling, practiced. "Thea, sweetheart, please, I didn't mean it, come back, we can fix this." And there's a pause where I can almost hear her scanning for the best angle, the best hook, then her tone shifts slightly sharper. "You embarrass me in front of everyone." And there it is, the real wound. Not what she did to me, what I did to her reputation. I delete it without listening again because I refuse to let her perform inside my head. When I get home, Marcus opens the door before I knock, like he's been standing there waiting. And the second I step inside the warmth of the apartment, I feel my body start to shake, not sobbing. Just that delayed tremor after danger passes. Marcus takes the box from under my arm like it's fragile, sets it on the counter, and pulls me into his chest. And he doesn't ask what happened first. He asks the only question that matters. "Did you stay calm?" And I nod. And he kisses the top of my head like that's the victory. Because it is. Staying calm in a room designed to make you feel small is the whole war. I sink onto the couch and stare at my hands, and I tell him, "She tried to turn it into a pity play. She tried to grab the box." And Marcus's jaw tightens. Of course she did. And then the next wave comes, my email pings, then again and again, and I check. And there are messages from people whose names I don't recognize. Subject lines like, "Pleasure meeting you tonight," and "You're very impressive," and "I'm sorry for what you went through." And one that makes my stomach twist. Because it's so blunt. "Would love to discuss a possible design project." And I just stare at it, because it's almost grotesque how fast people convert human pain into opportunity. But that's the world my mother worships. The world where worth is what you can extract. I hand my phone to Marcus and say, "Read this." And while he scrolls, I open a notepad because my brain goes into systems when it's stressed. I start listing the facts like I'm building a case file. Public humiliation. False. Statements, decade-long defamation, proof of business, proof of letter, witnesses, and then I stop because I hear my own thought, defamation. And it's insane that my mother's love has always felt like a contract, and contracts can be breached. And if you're watching this and you've lived through this kind of family betrayal, tell me something in the comments. Have you ever felt like the person who hurt you is more concerned with how they look than what they did? Because that's the pattern. That's the whole game. My mother isn't heartbroken that she lost her daughter. She's furious that she lost her narrative. Marcus hands me the phone back and says, "She's already texting people." And I say, "How do you know?" And he shows me a screenshot from one of his contacts. Apparently a friend of a friend who was at the party sent it. My mother posted in a private country club group chat. Not publicly where she could be challenged. Privately where sympathy is automatic, and the message reads like a soap opera. "Thea has been struggling. She's unstable. She showed up tonight and caused a scene. We're devastated. Please pray for our family." And I just stare at it because it's so predictable, it's almost boring. And that's when I feel the anger finally sharpen. Not a wild anger, a clean anger. The kind that makes you stop tolerating nonsense because she's still doing it, even after being exposed. "She's still trying to paint me as the problem," Marcus says. "We can respond." And I shake my head. "No, we don't chase lies. Because if I chase her story, I'm still orbiting her, and I'm done orbiting her. And then my phone rings again from a number I do recognize. Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, and the second I hear her voice I go soft. Because she's the person who kept my father's promise when my mother didn't. She says, "I heard," and I laugh quietly. "How fast did it travel?" And she says, "Fast enough that Eleanor Brooks called me." And my heart flips because Eleanor is not the type of woman who calls unless something matters, and Patricia continues, "Eleanor wants to meet you tomorrow in person." And I sit up, suddenly alert. "Why?" And Patricia pauses like she's choosing her words carefully. "Because what happened tonight brought up something she suspected for years. Something about the way your mother handled the insurance and the estate." And the room feels colder. Marcus's eyes lock onto mine like he senses the shift. And I say, "What are you saying?" And Patricia sighs, "I'm saying your father's death wasn't just grief for your mother. It was an opportunity, and Eleanor thinks there are documents, paperwork, maybe even a discrepancy that could explain how your mother moved so fast, how she was able to start over so cleanly." And my throat tightens because I suddenly remember the boxes. How my mother packed my father's things in 2 weeks like she was clearing a stage. How she used the phrase "start over" like we were clutter, and I say, "Are you telling me she did something illegal?" And Patricia says, "I'm telling you we should stop assuming she only did what was legal." And my stomach drops because I've spent years telling myself my mother was cold, selfish, emotionally negligent, but still within normal human boundaries. And now I'm realizing I may have been giving her too much credit. Marcus sits beside me and takes my hand, and I can feel his thumb move in slow circles like he's anchoring me. And Patricia says, "Thea, I kept the original letter, but I also kept something else your father left with me." And I whisper, "What?" And she says, "A sealed envelope addressed to you. Not the one you've seen, a different one, and David told me, only give this to her if she ever needs to protect herself from Linda." And my skin goes prickly because my father saw this coming like weather, like a storm pattern. And he prepared for it, and I ask, "What's in it?" And Patricia says, "I don't." "No, I never opened it, but Eleanor thinks it may relate to an account, or a beneficiary change, or something your mother was never supposed to touch." And I just sit there staring at the box on my counter like it's suddenly a bomb. Because tonight wasn't just a public confrontation, it might be the first domino in something bigger. Something that could explain why my mother hated my father's side of the family so much she cut them off. Not because of grief, but because they were witnesses. And then my phone lights up with a new text from an unknown number, and it's a photo. It's a screenshot from inside the party. My mother sitting with her head in her hands while Richard argues with Eleanor near the bar, and the caption reads, "They're saying you committed fraud." And my heart stops for a beat, because that word is heavy, fraud. It doesn't belong to petty family drama. It belongs to courtrooms, and Marcus says, "Who sent that?" And I scroll up, and it's from someone who signs there. Name at the bottom like a threat, Derek, and his message underneath says, "You have no idea what you just started." And I feel my mouth go dry because for the first time all night I believe him. Not because I'm scared of Derek, but because I'm realizing my mother has secrets that don't end with insults. And if she thinks I'm about to uncover something that could cost her real status, real money, real freedom, she won't just cry and call me unstable. She'll fight, and my mind flashes to the way Richard blocked the doorway, the way his voice turned smooth when he saw money slipping away. And I think they're not panicking because they lost a gift. They're panicking because something else is about to surface, something they buried a long time ago. Marcus squeezes my hand and says, "We're not doing this alone." And I nod, because tomorrow I'm meeting Eleanor. Tomorrow I'm opening whatever my father left. And tomorrow I might find out that the story of my life wasn't just neglect and cruelty, it was theft dressed up as parenting. And that's the kind of betrayal that doesn't just hurt your feelings, it changes your past, it changes your name, it changes what you're owed. And as my phone keeps buzzing with more messages, more voicemails, more people suddenly remembering I exist, I realize the real question isn't whether my mother will apologize. The real question is what she's so desperate to keep hidden that she'd rather call her own daughter a freeloader in public than let her get close to the truth. The next morning I wake up like my body ran a marathon in my sleep, the kind of exhaustion that sits behind your eyes and makes your jaw ache. And for 2 seconds I forget why. Then my phone lights up on the nightstand like a warning flare, and everything floods back. The party, the box, my mother's voice calling me a freeloader, like she was reciting a script she'd practiced, the way the room changed when the key hit the light, and that last message from Derek, "You have no idea what you just started." I sit up, and the first thing I do is check if I regret anything, and I don't. Not a single syllable, but I do feel the danger now, the kind you feel when you've exposed someone who has more to lose than you realized. Marcus is already awake, coffee in hand, calm in that annoyingly steady way he has when the world is burning. He says, "You slept like you were fighting." And I say, "I was." And he doesn't try to comfort me with cliches, he just asks, "What's the plan?" Because plans are the only thing that keeps chaos from turning into trauma. I tell him I'm meeting Eleanor Brooks at noon, and Marcus's eyebrows lift. "The Eleanor Brooks?" And I nod, and he whistles low, because in my father's circles Eleanor isn't just a friend. She's a connector, the kind of woman who doesn't raise her voice but can ruin your social oxygen with one phone call. And if she wants to meet, it means last night wasn't just embarrassing. It was alarming. I shower, but even the water feels like it's hitting bruises I didn't know I had. I put on a simple black blazer and jeans, nothing flashy, nothing apologetic, and as I'm tying my hair back, I catch myself scanning my own face like I'm looking for the old version of me, the one who would have shown up to that party begging for crumbs, and she isn't there anymore. She's gone. And it scares me a little how clean that change feels, like a switch flipped. Marcus drives because he insists. And halfway there he says, "If this becomes legal, we get a lawyer." And I laugh once sharp. I don't even know what this is yet. And he says, "Exactly," and I realize he's right, because when family drama suddenly uses words like fraud, beneficiary, documents, discrepancy, it stops being emotional and starts being structural. It starts touching property and records and signatures, and people get uglier when the stakes are paper. We meet Eleanor at a quiet restaurant on the Upper East Side that smells like polished wood and old money, the kind of place where nobody's loud because they don't have to be. Eleanor stands when I walk in, tall, silver hair, pearls, eyes like she's been reading people longer than I've been alive. She looks at me for one long second and says, "You have your father's posture." And it hits me in the chest so hard I almost lose my breath, because nobody has said anything about my father in years without it being weaponized or erased. I sit. Marcus sits slightly behind me like backup, without making it theatrical. And Eleanor doesn't waste time. She doesn't ask about the party. She doesn't perform sympathy. She says, "Your mother lied to me for a decade." And I answer honestly, "She's been lying longer than that." Eleanor nods like she expected it. Then she slides a thin folder across the table toward me. I don't open it yet because my hands suddenly feel too warm. Eleanor says, "This is what I know, and what I suspect, and what I can prove." And that sentence alone makes my stomach drop, because I've lived my whole life in the land of feelings and stories, and now I'm in the land of proof. She continues, "When David died, Linda told our circle the insurance barely covered the funeral and that there was nothing left. She told me she was struggling. She told me she had to start over." She says the phrase "start over" with a little curl of contempt, like she's tasting something rotten. But within 18 months, she had remarried into a 4-bedroom colonial, country club membership, and the kind of spending that doesn't come from panic. It comes from cushion. I swallow and say, "I heard her say the insurance money came through." Eleanor's eyes sharpen. "You heard her say that?" And I nod, and she says, "Good, keep that memory because it matters." She taps the folder. David had a policy through his employer, yes, but he also had a private supplemental policy that only a few people knew about, and he had a small investment account that was not meant to be touched by a spouse without certain conditions. My mouth goes dry. "What conditions?" Eleanor pauses, looks directly at me. "If the spouse was the beneficiary she could access." I don't interrupt Eleanor because something in her tone tells me this isn't a conversation. It's a disclosure, the kind that changes how you see your own past. She continues without rushing. "If the spouse was the beneficiary, she could access portions of it, but not all, and not without documentation acknowledging the existence of a dependent minor." My chest tightens at those words, dependent minor, because that was me, 16, grieving, invisible. Eleanor watches my face carefully and says, "Linda never filed that acknowledgement." The restaurant noise fades into a dull hum like I'm underwater. Marcus shifts slightly behind me but doesn't speak. Eleanor goes on. "Instead, She filed paperwork declaring herself sole dependent, which allowed her to access a larger portion up front, but created discrepancies later when assets were moved, reclassified, and combined with marital property. She taps the folder again. Last night, when I saw your letter, when I heard you read David's words, something clicked, because David was meticulous. He would never leave his child unprotected unless he believed someone else would honor that responsibility. And when I realized Linda had told everyone there was nothing left for you, I started asking questions. I finally find my voice. What kind of questions? Eleanor's mouth curves into something that isn't a smile. The kind people don't like. She opens the folder now and slides out copies, not originals, but enough to make my pulse jump. Account summaries, policy references, dates that line up too neatly to be coincidence, Eleanor says. I am not your lawyer, and I am not accusing anyone of a crime, but there are unanswered questions about where certain funds went and why your name never appeared where it should have. My first instinct is disbelief, not because I think Eleanor is wrong, but because my whole life I've been trained to minimize my own importance, to assume anything missing was never meant for me. Marcus finally speaks, quiet but firm. What are you suggesting? Eleanor looks at him with approval. I am suggesting that Thea's mother built her second life using money that was supposed to at least partially safeguard her daughter, and that when that daughter disappeared instead of collapsing, the story Linda told everyone had to get uglier to justify the outcome. The word uglier sits heavy. I think about every story Derek repeated with that smug grin, about me being unstable, irresponsible, incapable. It wasn't just cruelty, it was maintenance, I say. So the lie had to grow. Eleanor nods. Exactly. And lies that big require witnesses, repetition, and time, which is why last night mattered so much. Because the narrative cracked in public. She leans back slightly. People saw evidence that contradicted the story they'd been fed, and once doubt enters a closed system, it spreads. My hands curl together under the table. What happens now? Eleanor doesn't answer immediately. She studies me. That depends on what you want. And that question lands harder than everything else, because for the first time this isn't about surviving or escaping or proving anything, it's about choice, and choice feels dangerous when you've never been allowed one. Marcus's hand brushes mine briefly, grounding me. Eleanor says, you can walk away and live your life as you already have, which is impressive by any measure, or you can ask for an accounting, quietly, through counsel, and force the truth into daylight. My stomach twists, and my mother. Eleanor's gaze doesn't soften. Will likely claim ignorance, fear, misunderstanding, and then attempt reconciliation if she thinks it will preserve her position. I think of Linda's tears snapping off like a switch the moment the room stopped buying them. I ask, and if I do nothing? Eleanor shrugs slightly. Then nothing happens, except that people will still talk. And your mother will still know you are no longer controllable. That last word sends a shiver through me. Controllable, because that's what I was supposed to be. Pliable, grateful, quiet. Eleanor gathers the papers back into the folder and slides it toward me. Take this, read it when you're ready. Don't rush. The worst thing you can do now is move out of anger. She stands, signaling the meeting is over. Your father would have wanted you to have options, not pressure. And just like that, she's gone, leaving behind a table that feels like the epicenter of something seismic. Marcus exhales slowly. Well, he says, that escalated. And I let out a shaky laugh that surprises me, because humor slips out when fear has nowhere else to go. We walk outside into the city noise, horns and footsteps and life continuing like my internal world didn't just tilt. And as soon as we're on the sidewalk, my phone vibrates again. I glance down and see my mother's name, then another buzz and another. Voicemails stacking like dominoes. Marcus asks, you want me to answer? And I shake my head. No, not yet, because I can feel it, the shift. She knows something is wrong. Maybe not the details, but the balance has changed and she's reaching for control. We get home, and I finally sit on the couch and open the folder, not to read everything, but to confirm it's real, that this isn't some elaborate projection. The numbers stare back at me, calm, indifferent, undeniable. And suddenly the past reorganizes itself. The rushed packing of my father's things, the way my mother wouldn't let me keep the watch. The speed with which she replaced grief with logistics. It wasn't just emotional avoidance, it was urgency. My phone rings again, and this time it's Derek. I almost laugh, because of course it is. The enforcer always moves first. I don't answer, but his text comes through seconds later. You really screwed things up last night. Mom's a mess. I type and delete 3 responses before settling on none. Because I don't owe him a performance. Marcus watches me carefully. You okay? And I nod slowly. I think so, just recalibrating. Because that's what this feels like my internal compass is being reset after years of pointing toward appeasement. That night I don't sleep much, not because I'm panicking, but because my mind keeps replaying moments with new context. The way my mother said independence like a curse, the way Richard enjoyed delivering ultimatums. They weren't teaching me resilience, they were clearing space. The next morning my mother shows up unannounced, pounding on the door like urgency itself. Marcus opens it before I can stop him. Linda stands there smaller somehow, eyes red, mouth trembling. I need to talk to my daughter, she says, emphasis heavy. Marcus steps aside but stays close, and Linda rushes toward me like she expects a hug. I don't move. She stops short, recalculates. Thea, please, you humiliated us. There it is, not hurt, not regret, optics. I say quietly, you humiliated yourself. She flinches. How could you do that to me? She whispers fiercely, in front of everyone. I meet her gaze steadily. You did it to me first. She shakes her head. You didn't have to bring documents, letters. You didn't have to make it so dramatic. I almost smile at the word dramatic. You called me a freeloader and told me to get out. My voice stays calm. What part of that was subtle? She looks past me, scanning the apartment, noticing details she's never earned the right to judge. You think you're better than us now, she snaps. And there it is, the core wound, I say. No. I think I'm done being smaller so you feel bigger. Her face hardens, you owe me. And that's when I know, deep in my bones, that nothing she says next will be about me. Only about loss of control. I ask, what exactly do I owe you? She gestures wildly. Everything. I raised you, I sacrificed. I tilt my head. You housed me until you decided I was inconvenient. Her voice rises. I protected you. And I can't stop the bitter laugh that escapes. From what, Mom? From having a future. Marcus shifts closer. A silent line drawn. Linda sees it and pivots tactics instantly. Tears spill. Voice softens. I was scared, she whispers. I didn't know how to survive after your father died. And for a split second I feel it. Empathy flickers. But it doesn't erase accountability. I say gently, being scared doesn't give you permission to erase me. She opens her mouth, then closes it. Then says the thing she thinks will end this. People are asking questions. There it is. They're wondering where the money went. My heart thuds once, slow and heavy. I keep my expression neutral. What money? Her eyes widen just a fraction, caught. She recovers quickly. Don't play games. I step closer now, not aggressively, just firmly. I'm not playing anything, but if you're worried about questions, maybe you should answer them honestly. Her breathing quickens. You wouldn't, she says, almost pleading. You wouldn't do that to your own mother. And I realize this is the moment she's been training me for my entire life. The guilt lever, the family loyalty script, and I feel it loosen and fall away. I say quietly, I already did nothing for 10 years, Mom. That was your chance. Silence stretches, heavy and fragile. Finally, she straightens, wipes her face, and her voice goes cold. You think Eleanor Brooks is on your side, she scoffs. She doesn't care about you. She cares about her reputation. I shrug. Maybe, but she cares about truth. 2. Linda's eyes narrow. If you pursue this, you will destroy what's left of this family. And the irony almost takes my breath away. I answer softly. You destroyed it. I just stopped pretending. She stares at me like she's seeing a stranger, and maybe she is. After a long moment, she turns toward the door. You'll regret this, she says, not looking back, and when the door closes behind her, the apartment feels lighter, quieter. Marcus exhales. Well, that was awful. I nod, and clarifying, because something has shifted again, not just externally, but internally. The fear has been replaced by resolve. I sit at the table later with the folder open, not to memorize figures, but to understand the shape of what was taken, and I realize something crucial. This isn't about revenge. It's about closure and accountability, about refusing to carry a lie that someone else benefited from. My phone buzzes again. This time a text from an unknown number. This is Richard. We need to talk like adults. I show Marcus and he snorts. Translation: he's scared. And for the first time, that doesn't scare me back because the power dynamic has flipped, not because I gained money or status, but because I'm no longer afraid of losing their approval. And as night falls, I sit by the window and think about my father, about the quiet foresight that saved me without my knowing, about how love sometimes looks like preparation instead of protection. And I understand now that the next step isn't explosive, it's deliberate, because when truth starts unraveling carefully constructed lies, the ones who built them panic, and panic makes mistakes, and I'm ready to watch what happens when they do, because the story isn't over yet, not even close. I didn't decide anything that night, and that was intentional because rushing would have meant I was still reacting to them instead of choosing for myself. So the next few days I moved through my life like normal on the surface while everything underneath recalibrated. I went to work, reviewed designs, approved materials, smiled at clients, all while my phone kept lighting up with missed calls, voicemails, messages that ranged from panicked to angry to manipulative. My mother cycled through every tone she'd perfected over decades: wounded, indignant, nostalgic, threatening. And when those stopped working, Richard tried. Then Derek, then numbers I didn't recognize, people who had never cared about me before suddenly very invested in family unity, which was fascinating considering unity had never included me. Marcus watched it all with quiet concern, never pushing, just asking occasionally if I was okay. And the truth was I felt strangely steady, like I'd finally stepped onto solid ground after years of compensating for a tilt I didn't know how to name. A week after the party, Eleanor emailed me, short, precise, asking if I'd like an introduction to an attorney who specialized in estate reconciliation and fiduciary review. Not litigation yet, just fact-finding. No pressure, she wrote. Information doesn't obligate action. And that line stuck with me because it echoed what she'd said in person, that my father would have wanted me to have options, not ultimatums. I sat with that email for a full day before replying yes, because even choosing to learn felt like reclaiming something. The meeting happened in a nondescript office downtown, glass walls, neutral art, a place designed to make emotions secondary to process. The attorney, Ms. Klein, listened without interruption as I laid out the timeline: my father's death, my mother's remarriage, the sudden disappearance of anything that tied me to my previous life, the storage closet room, the eviction, the decade of silence, the anniversary party, the box, the letter, Eleanor's concerns. Ms. Klein took notes, but more importantly, she asked questions my family never had, clarifying, specific, precise, questions that framed my experience not as drama, but as data. When I finished, she said calmly, "There are enough irregularities here to justify a formal accounting request." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" She explained without jargon that an accounting wouldn't accuse anyone of wrongdoing outright. It would simply require disclosure of how funds were handled, where they moved, who authorized what. If everything was above board, she said, then transparency should not be a problem. I almost laughed at that because transparency had never been my mother's strength. I asked, "And if it wasn't?" Ms. Klein didn't smile. "Then facts will speak for themselves." I left that office feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter because the fog was clearing, heavier because clarity carries responsibility. When I got home, Marcus was on the couch scrolling. He looked up. "How bad?" I sat beside him. "Not bad, just real." And that seemed to satisfy him because he nodded and said, "Then whatever you decide, I'm with you," which was something I still wasn't used to hearing without conditions attached. The accounting request went out 2 days later, formally worded, unemotional, addressed to my mother and Richard, requesting documentation related to my father's estate and subsequent asset transfers. I didn't tell them it was coming because I didn't owe them a heads up. The response was immediate and explosive. My mother showed up again, this time with Richard in tow, unannounced. Faces set in matching expressions of righteous outrage. Richard didn't bother with pleasantries. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded the moment the door opened. Marcus stepped forward, but I held up a hand. "I'm asking questions," Richard scoffed. "You're accusing us." I met his gaze steadily. "No, I'm requesting information." My mother's voice cut in sharp. "After everything we've done for you." And there it was again. The narrative reflex, I said calmly. "This isn't about gratitude. It's about accuracy." Richard's face flushed. "You think you can just sick lawyers on us because you had one good year." And that revealed more than he meant to. That they still believed my success was a fluke, Temporary, undeserved. My mother tried a different angle, stepping closer, lowering her voice. Thea, people are talking. This is embarrassing. I nodded. Yes, lies tend to be when they're questioned. Richard slammed his hand on the doorframe. If you pursue this, you will destroy us. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear, only a strange sadness, because that sentence was a confession, not a threat. I replied quietly, if the truth destroys you, that's not my doing. My mother stared at me like she didn't recognize my face. Who put you up to this? She snapped. Eleanor, that man of yours. I shook my head. No one put me up to anything. I finally listened to myself. Something flickered then. Not anger, not fear, but something like loss, and it made her lash out. Your father would be ashamed of you. And that one landed, sharp and unexpected. But instead of breaking me, it clarified everything. I said softly. My father prepared for this, because he knew you. Silence fell hard and fast. Richard swore under his breath. My mother's eyes darted like she was calculating exits. We'll have our lawyer respond, Richard said stiffly, and I nodded. That's fine. They left without another word, and when the door closed, Marcus exhaled. Well, they're scared. And I realized he was right, because fear was the only thing that could make them abandon performance so completely. The waiting that followed was tense but illuminating. Documents trickled in through counsel, partial at first, incomplete, delayed, and every delay said more than the papers themselves. Transfers that didn't align with stated purposes, funds moved between accounts without clear justification, insurance proceeds commingled with marital assets despite obligations to a minor dependent. Nothing yet that screamed criminal, but enough to make the story they'd told publicly impossible to maintain. Eleanor called one evening, her tone clipped but satisfied. People are connecting dots, she said, quietly. I asked how she knew. She chuckled softly. Because Linda has been calling around trying to control the narrative again, and people are less receptive now. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother had spent years telling everyone I was unstable, unreliable. Now she was the one sounding frantic. A few days later, Derek texted me out of nowhere, can we talk? Just us. And against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him for coffee. Curiosity more than hope. He showed up late, agitated, eyes darting, and wasted no time. You didn't have to go this far, he said, stirring his drink aggressively. I raised an eyebrow. Define far, he leaned in. Mom's losing friends, Richard's business is taking hits, you're ruining them. I studied him, really studied him. The boy who'd had everything handed to him and still felt cheated. You mean consequences? I said, he scoffed. You always play the victim. And I felt a flicker of anger but kept my voice steady. I was a victim, Derek. You just didn't like who it inconvenienced. He slammed his cup down. You think you're better than us now. There it was again, I sighed. I think I'm done carrying blame that isn't mine. He shook his head. You know Mom was scared after your dad died. I nodded. Yes. Then why can't you let it go? I met his gaze. Because fear explains behavior. It doesn't excuse it. He leaned back, exasperated. So what do you want? An apology, money, revenge? I thought about that, then said, I want the truth to exist without being buried. He laughed humorlessly. You sound like a lawyer. I smiled faintly. I learned from watching you all. He stood abruptly. You've changed. And I replied, no. I stopped shrinking. He left without another word, and I realized something important. This process wasn't just exposing financial discrepancies. It was forcing everyone to confront the roles they'd played. And not everyone was willing to do that. Weeks passed, more documents, more questions, no resolution yet. But the pressure mounted. My mother stopped calling, then abruptly switched tactics, sending long emails dripping with nostalgia, childhood memories rewritten to position her as a misunderstood martyr. I didn't respond, because engagement was her oxygen. Instead, I focused on my life. My work flourished. Clients came through referrals sparked by the publicity of the party. Not scandalous. Just intrigued by the woman who'd walked away with dignity and a box. Marcus and I planned a small getaway, something grounding, and on the last night sitting by the water he asked, do you regret opening this door? I considered it carefully, the stress, the resurfaced pain, the uncertainty, then thought of the 16-year-old girl in the closet room, the 18-year-old carrying suitcases alone. The 10 years of silence where I blamed myself, and I shook my head. No, I regret not opening it sooner. When we returned, there was a letter waiting, official, heavy paper from Richard's lawyer, acknowledging discrepancies, proposing a private settlement, no admission of wrongdoing, of course, but an offer to compensate, in the interest of closure. I read it twice, then handed it to Marcus. "What do you think?" he asked. I shrugged. "I think they want this to go away quietly," he nodded. "And you?" I looked out the window. "I think silence has cost me enough." Because here was the crux. This wasn't about money. It was about whether I would once again absorb discomfort to make others comfortable, or whether I would let truth exist even if it made people uneasy. I forwarded the letter to Ms. Klein with a single line, "Let's continue," and when my phone rang an hour later with my mother's number, I didn't answer. But this time it wasn't avoidance, it was choice. Because something irreversible had happened. The story was no longer theirs to control, and as the days unfolded, I could feel the ground shifting beneath them, rumors solidifying into understanding, questions into conclusions, and I knew the next move wouldn't be quiet, because people who've relied on secrecy panic when the light doesn't turn off, and I was ready for whatever came next because for the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was standing in my own center, watching the consequences ripple outward, knowing the most difficult part wasn't behind me, it was approaching, and I wasn't running from it anymore. I didn't expect the next escalation to come from outside the family, but that's exactly how it happened. Because once secrets stop being contained, they don't stay loyal to the people who created them. They start drifting toward anyone willing to listen, and about 10 days after I told Ms. Klein to continue, I got an email from someone I didn't recognize, a woman named Marjorie Klein. Subject line simple and unsettling. "I think I know why your father was worried." I stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. My first instinct was caution because when chaos starts circling, opportunists always show up, but something about the phrasing felt different. Not sensational, not manipulative, just precise. The email was short, almost restrained. She explained that she had worked at the same insurance firm my father's policy had been issued through, not directly on his case, but adjacent, administrative, compliance adjacent, the kind of role people forget exists, and she'd recognized his name when it surfaced again recently through a professional contact who'd heard a story about an anniversary party gone wrong. She wrote, "There were internal concerns at the time about how certain claims were handled, but I was junior and not in a position to intervene. I've carried that with me." She ended by saying she understood if I didn't want to engage, but if I did, she was willing to talk. I forwarded the email to Ms. Klein immediately, who replied within minutes. "Do not respond yet, let me vet," which was reassuring because part of growth is learning not to shoulder things alone anymore. 2 days later, Ms. Klein called, her tone sharper than usual. "She's legitimate," she said, "and if what she's hinting at is accurate, it changes the leverage significantly." That word leverage landed heavy because leverage isn't justice, it's power, and power had never been on my side before. We arranged a call with Marjorie, recorded, documented, careful, and when her face appeared on the screen, she looked nervous, not opportunistic, mid-50s, tired eyes, the kind of person who'd spend a career doing what she was told and then questioning it too late. She started slowly, explaining that after my father's death there had been questions internally about beneficiary allocations and expedited approvals, that certain discretionary decisions had been pushed through unusually fast, that a supervisor had overridden a standard delay period citing family hardship. She paused there and said quietly, "At the time I assumed it was compassion." She swallowed. Later I realized it was convenience. My chest tightened. She continued. "There were notes, internal notes, about concerns that funds intended for dependent support might be diverted, but those notes were never escalated." She looked directly at the camera. "Your mother was very persuasive." Silence hung between us like something fragile. Ms. Klein asked measured questions. Dates, names, documentation. Marjorie confirmed she no longer had access to internal systems, but she remembered enough to point us toward records that should exist, records that would show not just misallocation but intent. When the call ended, I sat back, stunned, because this wasn't just a messy family story anymore, it was a pattern, and patterns don't belong to one person, they implicate systems. I felt something unexpected then, not vindication, but grief. because my father hadn't just been preparing for a possibility. He'd been responding to something he already suspected, and that realization reframed everything. Marcus found me sitting in the dark an hour later. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, then shook my head. I think my dad knew more than I ever realized, and that broke something open, because I'd spent years believing his preparations were abstract caution, but now it looked like quiet resistance. A man protecting his child in the only way he could within a marriage he couldn't untangle. The next steps accelerated quickly. Ms. Klein filed supplemental requests, formal this time, citing potential misrepresentation and fiduciary breach. The language alone caused a reaction, because suddenly Richard's lawyer wasn't proposing settlement. He was asking for extensions. My mother's lawyer requested mediation, which was revealing because mediation is what people ask for when they want control over narrative. Not truth, I declined, and that refusal shifted the tone of everything, because up until that point they believed I wanted peace, that I could be bought off with quiet concessions. What they didn't understand was that peace without truth is just silence with better branding. The fallout spilled into social circles next. Eleanor called again, this time less composed. "People are nervous," she said. "Boards, charities, committees, no one wants to be adjacent to unresolved questions." I asked how my mother was handling it. Eleanor paused. "She's trying to charm her way through," she sighed. "But charm doesn't work when people feel deceived." And that sentence summed it up perfectly, because deception isn't just about lies. It's about forcing others to unknowingly participate in them, and once people realize they've been used as props, they don't forgive easily. A few days later, my mother emailed me directly, bypassing lawyers, bypassing protocol. The subject line read simply, "Please." The email itself was long, rambling, oscillating between apology and accusation. She said she'd done the best she could, that I didn't understand the pressure she'd been under, that Richard had guided financial decisions, that she'd been afraid, that she'd never meant to hurt me, then pivoted sharply to how my actions were destroying her reputation, how friends were distancing themselves, how she felt humiliated, exposed. "I don't recognize you anymore," she wrote, and that line stung because it was true. She didn't recognize me because I was no longer the version of me who absorbed her chaos quietly. I didn't reply, but I did something else instead. I wrote a response for myself, not to send, just to clarify, and in that response I named things I'd never named before. That love without protection isn't love, that fear doesn't justify cruelty, that being a parent is a responsibility, not a strategy. That letter stayed in my journal, but writing it anchored me, because the temptation to explain myself to her was still there, and I needed to remember why. Explanation was no longer required. The next unexpected development came from Richard's side, because desperation makes people sloppy, and one afternoon Ms. Klein called with a tone that made my stomach drop. "Richard's former accountant has come forward," she said, "voluntarily." That word mattered. Voluntary disclosures don't happen unless someone's trying to save themselves. The accountant, a man named Howard, had been let go 2 years earlier under the guise of restructuring, but in reality, because he'd raised concerns about inconsistent reporting. Concerns that had been dismissed at the time but now looked prescient. Howard had reached out through counsel, offering cooperation in exchange for immunity from liability. What he provided was a partial timeline of financial maneuvering that suggested my father's insurance payout hadn't just been used for family expenses, but leveraged as collateral in one of Richard's early business expansions, meaning money earmarked for dependent care had been used as risk capital, a gamble made without disclosure, without consent, without consideration for the child it was meant to protect. When I heard that, something cold settled in my chest, because that wasn't fear-driven mismanagement. That was opportunism. Ms. Klein was careful to temper expectations. "This doesn't guarantee outcome," she said, "but it clarifies intent. And intent changes everything, because intent strips away excuses." When Marcus and I talked that night, I admitted something I hadn't said out loud yet. "I think part of me hoped this would stay emotional," I said. "Messy but human," he nodded. "And now it's ugly in a different way." I finished, because emotional neglect hurts, but financial exploitation carries a different weight. It says you weren't just invisible, you were usable, and that realization rewired my anger. It sharpened it, because anger isn't destructive when it's directed. It becomes resolve. The legal process began to attract attention. Quiet attention, not headlines, but whispers in professional circles, and those whispers started landing back at me through clients, acquaintances, even distant relatives who'd never checked on me before but suddenly wanted to reconnect. I ignored most of them because curiosity isn't concern, and I'd learned to tell the difference. Derek tried again, this time through Marcus, sending a message framed as reconciliation, saying he didn't realize how bad things had been, that he missed having a sister. Marcus showed it to me without comment. I read it once and handed it back. "What do you want to do?" he asked, and I surprised myself by saying, "Nothing." Because silence can be a boundary, not a punishment, and boundaries don't require explanation. The mediation request came again, more urgently, accompanied by a revised settlement offer, higher, more comprehensive, including a written apology, which would have thrilled my younger self, but now felt hollow, because apologies that arrive only after leverage aren't remorse. Their negotiation, Ms. Klein asked me directly, "What is your end goal?" And I appreciated the question because it forced me to articulate something deeper than revenge or restitution. I thought about it and said, "I want the record corrected." She nodded. "That's consistent with your actions." And that became our guiding principle, not punishment, correction, making sure the truth existed in formal spaces, not just whispered ones. As weeks turned into months, the emotional tone shifted again. From confrontation to endurance, because processes drag, and dragging can be exhausting. But something else happened alongside the fatigue. I started noticing how much lighter my daily life felt without the constant background noise of appeasement. My work was sharper, my relationships calmer, my sleep deeper, and that contrast was instructive because it showed me how much energy I'd spent managing other people's discomfort. Energy I'd never get back, but could finally stop wasting. One evening, while we were cooking, Marcus asked casually, "Do you think she knows she lost you?" And that question lingered because I wasn't sure. My mother understood loss in terms of status, access, advantage. But did she understand relational loss, the kind that can't be reclaimed with performance? I didn't know, and more importantly, I didn't need to, because understanding her was no longer my responsibility. The next major turn came quietly, without drama, when Ms. Klein informed me that the accounting review had uncovered sufficient discrepancies to warrant formal findings. Nothing criminal yet, but enough that my mother and Richard would be required to amend prior statements and disclosures. In plain terms, the story they'd told for years would be officially challenged, corrected in records that mattered. And when I heard that, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief, not triumph. Relief that the burden of proof was no longer on my memory, my emotions, my credibility, but on documents. Because documents don't get accused of being dramatic. And as that reality settled in, my phone rang, my mother again, and this time I answered, not because I owed her, but because I wanted to hear her without reacting. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it, stripped of polish. "They're saying I have to make a statement," she whispered. "I don't know what to say." And for a moment, I felt the old reflex to guide her, to help her land on her feet, but I stopped myself because that reflex had cost me years. I replied calmly, "Tell the truth." Silence stretched. "I don't know how," she said, and that was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. I closed my eyes, then learned, and ended the call. And as the weeks continued to unfold, I knew something fundamental was approaching. Not a courtroom climax or public spectacle, but a reckoning of a different kind. One where roles would be reassigned whether people liked it or not. And I could feel the next phase gathering. Momentum, heavier, more consequential, because when systems start correcting themselves, individuals are forced to decide who they really are without the scaffolding of lies. And I was ready to watch that unfold, not with glee, not with fear, but with a steadiness I'd earned. Knowing the next development wouldn't just change my relationship with them, it would define the final shape of the story they could no longer control. By the time the amended disclosures were filed and the formal notices went out, the atmosphere around my mother shifted in a way I could feel even from a distance, because when people are forced to correct the record, they lose more than credibility, they lose control, and control had always been her oxygen, the thing she breathed without realizing it, the thing that shaped every interaction she ever had with me. And suddenly that oxygen was thinning. Friends stopped calling her first. Invitations dried up or arrived with strange new conditions. Conversations that used to glide on compliments now stumbled over awkward pauses, and while I wasn't present for any of it, I could tell by the quality of her voice when she called again. No performance this time, no grand narrative, just fatigue, the kind that comes from maintaining a version of yourself that no longer matches reality. She asked if we could meet. Neutral territory, no lawyers, no audience, just coffee, and my first instinct was to say no, because peace does not require proximity, but something in me was curious, not hopeful, just curious, because curiosity is what remains when fear has left the room. We chose a small cafe near the river, quiet enough that no one would overhear, public enough that nothing could escalate. She arrived early and stood when she saw me, then seemed unsure whether to hug me, so she didn't, which was new. She looked older than I remembered, not physically so much as structurally. Like something inside her had sagged under its own weight. We ordered and sat, and for a few moments neither of us spoke. Finally she said, "I don't know how this happened." And I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so consistent. That reflex to frame everything as a mystery rather than a sequence of choices. I replied, "It didn't happen, it accumulated." She flinched slightly, then nodded. "People are asking questions," she said. "They're asking about things I thought were settled." And there it was. Not an apology, not remorse, but inconvenience. The disruption of comfort. She looked at me then, really looked, and said, "You seem different." I told her, "I am." And that was the truest thing I could offer, because difference doesn't require justification. She tried next to frame herself as a victim of circumstance, of Richard's influence, of fear after my father died, of not knowing how to manage alone, and I let her speak. Not because I agreed, but because interrupting would have been old behavior, the behavior of a child still hoping to be understood. When she finished, I said, calmly, "You're explaining, not taking responsibility," she bristled. "What do you want from me?" And that question revealed the entire structure of her thinking, that every interaction was transactional. So I answered honestly, "Nothing," which unsettled her more than anger ever could, because nothing is not negotiable. She pressed, "Then why are you here?" And I said, "Because you asked. And because I wanted to see if you could sit with the truth without trying to reshape it." She stared into her cup, silent for a long time, then said quietly, "I don't know who I am if I'm not protecting myself." And for a moment I felt compassion, real compassion, not the self-erasing kind I'd been trained to offer, but the adult kind that acknowledges pain without excusing harm. I said, "That's something only you can figure out." And she nodded, tears finally appearing, not dramatic, just leaking. "I never thought you'd leave," she whispered, and there it was, the core belief that I would always remain orbiting her gravity, no matter how cold the space became. I told her gently, "I didn't leave, I stopped chasing," which is a different kind of movement entirely. When we parted, she asked if we could do this again, talk again. I said, "Maybe, not as a promise, but as a possibility contingent on behavior, because access is earned, not inherited." The days after that meeting were strangely quiet, as if the world was taking a breath, and in that quiet I noticed how much my internal landscape had changed. The hypervigilance was gone. The need to preemptively explain myself had faded. Even my dreams shifted, no longer looping through old scenes but moving forward into unfamiliar spaces. Meanwhile, the formal process continued, not dramatically, but methodically, documents reviewed, statements amended, professional consequences distributed without malice or spectacle. Richard withdrew from several boards by mutual agreement, which is language that means no one wants to say the real reason out loud. Derek moved again, this time out of state, not chasing opportunities so much as distance. My mother reduced her social footprint, fewer events, fewer appearances, a contraction that mirrored her internal reckoning. Through it all, I remained peripheral, not because I was excluded, but because I chose to be, and that choice was its own kind of power. Clients noticed my steadiness, my ability to navigate complexity without theatrics, and that trust translated into work, into opportunities that felt aligned rather than frantic. One afternoon, Eleanor called, not with gossip this time, but with something closer to respect. She said, "You handled this with more integrity than most people twice your age." I thanked her, then she added, "Your father would have been relieved." And that word, relieved, struck me deeply because I'd imagined him proud, imagined him angry on my behalf. But relief suggested something else, that his worry had finally eased, that the contingency plans he'd set in motion had fulfilled their purpose, and that thought allowed me to grieve him in a new way, not as a protector who failed, but as one who succeeded quietly over time. My mother reached out less frequently, and when she did, the tone shifted again, less defensive, more tentative. She stopped trying to rewrite history and began asking neutral questions about my life, small things, safe topics, and I answered selectively, not to punish, but to protect, because intimacy without accountability is just exposure. And I was done with that. The most surprising development came not from her, but from myself. When I realized one morning that I no longer felt the urge to narrate this story to anyone new, it had stopped being my identity and become simply part of my history, something that informed my values, but didn't dominate my sense of self. That realization felt like freedom, not the loud kind, but the quiet, sustainable kind. Marcus noticed it too. He said, "You're lighter," and I laughed, because for the first time that word didn't feel ironic. The final administrative meeting happened on a rainy Thursday, procedural, anticlimactic, but necessary. When it ended, Ms. Klein closed her folder and said, "This chapter is officially closed." And hearing that from someone who deals in facts rather than feelings mattered, because closure isn't emotional, it's structural, and structure had been missing for a long time. That evening I walked by the river alone, watching the water move steadily forward, indifferent to whatever had been dropped into it upstream, and I thought about how much energy I'd spent trying to swim against currents that were never designed for me. I thought about how my mother might spend the rest of her life trying to reassemble a narrative that no longer held, and I felt neither triumph nor pity, just acceptance. Because acceptance doesn't require approval, it requires clarity, and clarity had finally arrived. I knew there was still one more conversation ahead, not because I owed it, but because endings that are chosen feel different than endings that are imposed, and that conversation would not be dramatic. It wouldn't involve documents or witnesses. It would be simple and difficult and human, and I could feel it approaching, like the last wave after a storm, smaller than the others, but carrying the weight of everything that came before. And as I turned back toward home, I understood that the final reckoning would not be about proving anything, not about winning or losing, but about deciding what kind of presence, if any, would remain between us, and that decision would be mine alone, shaped not by guilt or obligation, but by the quiet certainty that I had already survived the worst, and whatever came next would be navigated on my terms, with eyes open, spine straight, and no need to look back except by choice. The morning the final truth settled wasn't dramatic or loud. It arrived quietly the way real endings usually do, not with slammed doors or raised voices, but with a sense of internal alignment that told me something fundamental had shifted. I woke up before the alarm and lay there staring at the ceiling of my own bedroom. Not a borrowed space or a temporary solution, but a place that existed because I had built a life capable of holding it, and for the first time in years my thoughts didn't drift toward what I still needed to prove or who still didn't understand me. Instead, they moved forward, which was new, because for so long forward had felt like a direction reserved for other people. I made coffee and stood by the window watching the city wake up, delivery trucks double parked, someone arguing into a phone, a woman laughing too loudly for that hour, life happening without needing my permission, and I realized that somewhere along the way my story had stopped being about survival and started being about choice, which is a different muscle entirely. Later that morning my mother called again, not frantic this time, not demanding. Her voice was smaller, stripped of strategy, and she said she wanted to apologize properly. No excuses, no explanations, just acknowledgement. And I almost declined because apologies after consequences can feel like negotiations in disguise. But something told me this wasn't about her repair, it was about my completion. So I agreed to meet once more, same cafe, same table. But the energy was different. She arrived without makeup, hair pulled back carelessly, eyes tired but clear. She didn't stand this time, just looked at me and said, "I hurt you," and stopped. No follow-up, no justification, just the sentence sitting there, and that mattered more than any speech she could have prepared. She continued slowly, "I chose comfort over courage, and I taught people the wrong story about you because it protected me." She swallowed hard. "I see now what that cost. And while part of me waited for the familiar turn towards self-pity, it didn't come. She didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't ask for access. She just let the truth exist without trying to manage it, and I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not reconciliation, but resolution. I told her, I accept that you see it now, which is different from absolution, and she nodded like she understood the distinction. We talked for a while about neutral things, the weather, a book she'd read, a place I was considering traveling to, and then she said something unexpected. I don't expect a relationship the way I imagined one, she said, but if there's ever space for something smaller and honest, I'd be grateful. And that was the moment I knew this chapter was actually ending, because gratitude without expectation is rare, and I told her, we'll see, not to withhold, but because honesty requires time. When we parted, there was no dramatic goodbye, just a brief hug that felt appropriate in scale, neither too intimate nor too distant, and as I walked away, I felt no pull to look back, not because I was hardened, but because I was complete. The days that followed were busy in the ordinary way: client meetings, deadlines, laughter with friends, a quiet dinner with Marcus where we talked about nothing important and everything meaningful. And then the message arrived that marked the true reckoning, an email forwarded from Eleanor, concise and devastating in its simplicity. The social committee had requested my mother step down from her remaining leadership roles due to ongoing reputational concerns, a phrase that carried the weight of everything she had spent decades trying to control, and I felt no surge of triumph, no sense of victory, just a calm acknowledgement that actions echo longer than intentions, that narratives eventually meet evidence, and that no amount of charm can outpace truth forever. That evening I sat down and wrote, not for publication, not for an audience, but for myself. I wrote about the girl who learned early that love could be conditional, about the woman who learned later that worth is not negotiated. I wrote about the quiet power of boundaries and the difference between being chosen and choosing yourself. And as I wrote, I realized how much I had learned, not just about betrayal, but about resilience, about how favoritism corrodes families, how gaslighting teaches children to doubt their own memory, how financial control is often disguised as guidance, and how walking away is sometimes the most honest response to manipulation. Somewhere in the middle of that writing, I paused and thought about you, the person listening to this right now, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you. And I want you to take a second and drop in the comments where you're watching from, not because it boosts anything, but because stories like this live better when we know we're not alone, when we remember there are people all over the world navigating versions of the same pain. And as I continued writing, I made sure to include the lessons I wish someone had handed me earlier, that family loyalty does not mean self-erasure, that respect is not owed to people who harm you just because they share your blood, that success is not revenge but clarity, and that the most powerful response to being underestimated is not proving them wrong loudly, but living well quietly. Weeks passed, and life continued to expand. Marcus and I set a date, not because we were in a rush, but because stability no longer felt fragile. My work deepened, not just in scale but in meaning. I became more selective, not chasing validation but alignment. My mother kept her distance respectfully, occasional messages that acknowledged boundaries, and that was enough. I no longer needed her to become the person she never was, because I had become the person I needed. And that realization was the final gift, the one no one could take away. Sometimes late at night, I still think about that moment at the party, the box pushed back toward me, the word freeloader hanging in the air like a verdict, and I feel a strange gratitude for it, because without that public fracture, the truth might have stayed buried, the reckoning might have been postponed, and I might have continued shrinking to fit a narrative that was never mine. That moment forced everything into the open, and while it hurt, it also healed in ways quiet endurance never could. The last call came months later, not from my mother, but from Derek. Awkward, stiff, his voice stripped of bravado. He said he wanted to apologize, not to reconnect, just to acknowledge that he had benefited from a system that hurt me. I thanked him and wished him well, and when the call ended, I felt nothing lingering, which told me everything I needed to know. Closure isn't loud, it's light. And now, as I sit here telling you this, I want to leave you with something real, not a moral wrapped in a bow, but a truth earned through experience. If someone calls you a burden while benefiting from your silence, That says nothing about your worth and everything about their fear. If you are being minimized to make someone else feel secure, that is not love. And if you have ever been told you couldn't survive on your own, remember this: the people who say that often rely on you believing it. The moment you stop, the entire structure shifts. This story doesn't end with applause or a reconciliation or a neat resolution. It ends with agency, with the understanding that you are allowed to walk away from narratives that harm you and write your own without asking permission. And if this resonated, if it stirred something uncomfortable or validating or familiar, share your thoughts in the comments. Challenge the idea that family loyalty excuses cruelty. Tell me whether you think the line was crossed. And when you're ready, watch the next story waiting for you. Because this one may have been about parents calling someone a freeloader, but the next one digs even deeper into what happens when the people who should protect you become the ones you have to protect yourself from. And once you see that pattern clearly, you never unsee it again.